True Crime Brewery contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Medical information is opinion based on facts of a crime and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
And I'm Dick.
Labeled as the rough sex killing or the Preppy Murder, the 1986 murder of college-bound teenager Jennifer Levin at the hands of so-called Preppy, Robert Chambers, caught the attention of the entire country. Her horrible death opened up discussions about the reckless and promiscuous world of teenagers in her crowd. In this time of the Me Too movement, the media's and the defense attorney's attempts to blame sexually active Jennifer for her own murder seems especially relevant. This was a classic case of victim blaming. But once we look into the life of Robert Chambers, we can see how he was raised to feel entitled and above the law. Chambers had been kicked out of several schools, he burglarized apartments, sold drugs, and he had once broken the arm of a girlfriend. Although he claimed that Jennifer was accidentally killed during rough sex, her body was brutalized in a way that showed it was not a consenting sex act. The nature of multiple wounds and evidence found for 25 feet around her body proved that she had made attempts to escape a brutal attack. We're going to talk about all of this in today's Quiet End discussion, the Preppy Murder, but first, of course, Dick has a wonderful beer for us to drink.
This is a wonderful beer. I chose Double Dry Hop Double Mosaic Dream, brewed by Other Half Brewing Company in the borough of Brooklyn. So it's a double IPA, and the name is kind of weird, so I thought I'd talk about that. The double dry hop means it's hopped twice, and the second hopping is with the mosaic hop of powder instead of the whole critter. So you lose all the parts of the plant. This is just pure hop powder.
Oh, so there are extraneous parts of the hop that are normally there?
Yeah.
Okay, wasn't aware of
that. I mean,
that.
if you do like a normal hop or a wet hop thing, you're usually throwing in the whole cone of hop. But this is just a powder.
I think I could do with a whole lesson on hops one day, although some of our listeners would probably roll their eyes and fast forward.
They'd turn off really quickly.
Yeah.
And just to mention mosaic hops, which seem to be a brewer's favorite right now, these are hops that give you a lot of different aromas and flavors, including earthy, floral, and fruity. So this particular beer, Double Dry Hop Double Mosaic Dream, is a hazy dark orange color with a small head but lots of lace. It has a citrus and tropical fruit aroma, very nice. Taste is even better, tangerine and mango, and there's hardly any malt presence there. It's just like drinking a fruit juice.
That sounds like a lovely beer.
It is a lovely beer. It's highly rated. Very rich, no alcohol character, even though it's 8.5%. Just a fun beer to drink.
Okay, thanks, Dick. Let's open that up.
Let's do that.
Okay, here we are at the quiet end. So it's Easter, nobody's around, right?
They're at home celebrating Easter. They're hunting Easter eggs. It's also Passover weekend.
That's right.
So this is a double celebration.
Well, we have family that celebrate both, or each.
We do. We have one Jewish member, and the rest of us are not Jewish.
Oh, okay. Right. And some are Christians.
Yeah, that's what I was aiming for.
Okay. This is a involved case, so let's get started on this discussion.
So it was a warm evening in 1986 when 18-year-old Jennifer Levin entered her favorite New York club and began looking for 19-year-old Robert Chambers. She wore a white camisole, a pink and white miniskirt, and little glass earrings. Robert was her crush. He was a handsome guy she had hooked up with a few times before, and she was hoping to rekindle their romance that night. And I'm thinking this is just as a late summer fling type of thing before going back to school.
Well, you're thinking that. I don't know if she was thinking that. I think she had some real feelings for him, or thought she did anyway.
She thought she did.
Yeah, which is normal at that age.
So this fashionable Upper East Side bar was crowded, and Jennifer didn't see Robert at first. The usual mass of wealthy, sophisticated prep school kids and recent graduates were there. They'd made this place their home away from home for the summer.
Well, spirits were high that night, and Jennifer joined right in, chatting with her friends and laughing at their jokes. She would eventually find Robert, flirt with him, and leave with him in the early morning.
Yeah, then 2 hours later, as the sun rose over Central Park, Jennifer was found by a bicyclist. She had been strangled. Her body and her face were bruised. One of her eyes was swollen shut. Earrings and her money, except for a torn $1 bill, were gone. Underpants had been removed. She lay spread-eagled, with her bra and camisole up around her neck and her skirt bunched up around her waist.
So, of course, police speculated that this had been a rape by a stranger that ended in murder. She was left in a very humiliating position. They didn't believe that anyone who had known her would have left her in this condition, but then they didn't know Robert Chambers yet. Phyllis Shanley, Robert Chambers' mother, arrived in the United States from Ireland in the late 1950s. She had grown up poor, the eldest of 6 children. She had escaped the family farm and studied nursing in Dublin. As part of her training, she worked without pay in the city's hospitals. Now, her patients there were poor. She cared for sufferers of communicable diseases, and she delivered babies because these women couldn't afford to have a doctor.
Yeah, so she was kind of a midwife by default.
Yeah, and I think that was probably more common back then.
Yeah.
You did more stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You were more of a generalist.
Right, right.
So Phyllis was an immigrant, but she had the dream of living a life like the Kennedys. She felt that in America a person could be the equal of anyone, and she wasn't afraid of hard work. She did private duty nursing, and she took a job at a large New York hospital. 3 years after arriving in America, she met Bob Chambers. He was a guy who had been raised in Westchester, attended private schools, and gone on to the American University in Washington, D.C. So he's clearly a class above her.
Yes, and I think she had expectations that she was going to live a better life with him, or a richer life.
As we learn more about her, I think that's her main goal.
Yes.
Is to further herself.
And that's not unusual when you grow up in poverty.
No.
That you focus on money. I mean, it sucks to be poor.
It does.
Yeah. So she married Bob in 1965, and a year later she gave birth to her first and only child, Robert Chambers, Jr. The boy was gorgeous with striking blue eyes. He was responsive and he smiled easily. By the time he was 18 months old, he was walking and talking. Phyllis adored him, but she was not demonstrative. She didn't give him hugs and kisses like the other mothers, but she really invested in him, invested her time and her money. She read to him, played educational games with him. By the time he was 3, he was quite well spoken, and he'd walk right up and shake hands when he was introduced to a new person. So she was teaching him manners. That was important to her as well.
Very important. You have to present yourself.
Yes. So they lived in a large apartment complex in Queens, and they didn't have a lot of money. Bob had a good job, but it wasn't anything special. Phyllis still worked part-time as a nurse. Now she preferred to care for patients on Manhattan's Upper East Side. They lived in lavish apartments decorated with crystal, silver, highly polished wood, and real art. Her Woodside home was depressing in comparison, because she dreamed of moving to the East Side one day. The East Side of grand, opulent townhomes and discreet residential hotels. She did get a taste of it with Bob's grandmother as well, because she lived in one of those hotels. It had a posh dining room, and once in a while Phyllis and little Robert were invited to dine with her there. So after several years in Woodside, Phyllis and Bob could afford to move to a better apartment in Jackson Heights. Now this wasn't the East Side, but it was enough of an improvement to please Phyllis for a while. She was very frugal with her earnings, and she decorated the apartment tastefully, actually spending hours polishing her expensive dark wood furniture.
And as a nurse, she chose to work for the extremely wealthy. One day she was assigned to actually work for the Kennedy family and nurse John back to health after he had a respiratory infection. Job didn't last that long, but it did make a lasting impression on Phyllis. So when Robert was 4, she enrolled him in the prestigious Manhattan nursery at the St. David's School. Most of the families who enrolled their kids there were very prominent, like the Hearsts, the Lawfords, and the Burkes.
Yeah, they all had kids there at one point.
They did. Very posh place.
Now that same year, Jennifer Levin was living with her parents in a small house in the commuter town of Merrick. Jennifer was the second daughter of Stephen and Ellen Levin. Stephen had had ambitions to be an actor, but by the time Jennifer was born, he was doing well with a small real estate firm in Manhattan. Jennifer's sister Danielle was regarded as the prettier one, but Jennifer was definitely the lively one. She was constantly following her older sister and trying to be included in the games with the older kids, and she was usually able to win them over and get included.
Now, meanwhile, sending Robert to St. David's School was very expensive and inconvenient, but Phyllis stuck by this decision because she was willing to work hard to give him what she thought of as a better life for him. Robert had become her main focus, as her own life and her marriage were not doing that well.
Right. There were issues.
There were. Now, one of them, the major one probably, was that Bob, her husband, was a very heavy drinker.
Well, that was the major one, but was his drinking more of a symptom? Because I bet she was a tough woman to live with.
Oh, I'm not getting into that.
I mean, you don't want to blame someone for someone else's addiction, but she certainly could have pushed him in that direction. She would be a tough lady.
Boy, I have a tough time
You can disagree.
wrapping that.
Yeah.
I think, what we know about alcoholism is that it's an inherited kind of trait.
That's true.
I find it a little difficult that she drove him to drink.
No, I'm not saying that.
I think, well, yeah, you are.
I think there's a predisposition to drink, and life circumstances can certainly lead you into destroying your life with the drink.
Okay, I'll go with that.
You don't have to. I'm just throwing that out there.
He did drink.
He drank a lot, and I'm not blaming Phyllis totally, but I'm saying, gee, that could have been a factor.
Yeah, it could have been a small factor. Sometimes Bob didn't come home when he was expected, and sometimes Phyllis couldn't find him at all. So she's getting more and more disappointed in the life that Bob was providing for their family. And Phyllis was strict with Robert when he was little. He had limited TV time, had to go outdoors and play every day, and when he didn't obey her, she'd hit him with a strap.
Well, I think the first two things are fine, but I'd say the strap is bad. What would you say? I think kids need to go outdoors.
No, I'm all for the limited TV time and being active.
Right,
The strap is how she was brought up.
Yes, doesn't mean it make it right.
It doesn't,
No.
but that's how she was raised. And this was 30 years ago.
Right.
More than 30 years ago.
Well, he's about my age.
There's a lot more corporal punishment.
There was, but I don't think
then.
I ever got strapped.
No.
No.
But I'll bet you got spanked.
Oh, I got smacked.
Yeah.
I got a lot of good smacks.
Okay. So Robert's teachers were worried about him at the preschool. He didn't see his mother very much, and he had no friends. And attending St. David's kept him separate from the neighborhood boys, and he became more isolated. He also seemed eerily stoic, keeping things to himself, without complaint. One time he took a fall and broke his collarbone, but he didn't cry about that, which hurts like hell, by the way.
I would imagine.
But he didn't cry. He just retreated to his room until his babysitter checked on him and ended up going to the hospital.
Back in Merrick, Jennifer was sometimes a bit too emotive. Some of her playmates' mothers said she was too hyperactive and they couldn't control her. But she got a lot of attention and she had many friends. She liked to play dress-up and put on shows for her parents and her older sister's friends, so she was quite a performer.
That she was.
By 1973, Jennifer's parents' marriage was falling apart. It had always been a tumultuous marriage, and they were moving in different directions. Ellen Levin was artistic and a bit of a flower child. Steve was more serious and practical, and he was really trying to focus on his real estate business. They separated, and Steve moved to Manhattan, while Ellen stayed in Merrick with her two girls. Jennifer was 5 at this time.
Robert, in the meantime, blended in quite well at St. David's. Phyllis was always pretty outspoken at the parents' meetings. She clung to her strict religious beliefs. Staunch Catholic, right?
Right.
But she was also very focused on the presentation of herself, her home, and her son.
Oh, absolutely.
Gotta be. She shopped smartly in thrift shops where the women like those she worked for donated their wardrobes after they were old.
A season old. This is what these women did.
Just a season.
Every year they got a new wardrobe.
Well, you have to.
Yeah. I wear jeans I wore in high school.
I know. I have a sports jacket that is 50 years old.
Older than me,
and I still wear it.
Yeah.
But this is how she did it.
Right.
And it's a way to stay dressy without spending a huge amount of money.
Well, she wanted to have that sophisticated appearance of the women that she worked for.
Right. She did. And she also did entertaining in her apartment and set her table with linens and china that she also found at second-hand shops.
So she had good taste. She'd learned that from the houses she worked in.
She did. She was an apt student.
Yes.
Now, when Robert turned 8, Phyllis enrolled him in the Knickerbocker Grays, which is an after-school military drill group that taught discipline and patriotism to wealthy boys. She was eager for Robert to make friends with what she considered the right sort of boys.
I love that phrase, the right sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just this whole thing about the Knickerbocker Grays just makes me gag anyway.
Really? It's something, yeah. It's a something of the past, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that still goes on.
I don't know. I think it was actually falling out of favor back when he joined, and that's how he was able to get in.
That's true.
Yeah.
They were a little hungry for recruits.
Yes, so it's probably not a thing. Now, when Jennifer was 6, her mother moved them to California. Ellen was looking for a more carefree lifestyle, and she'd read that people were living in Los Angeles in a different type of way. In L.A., she rented an apartment that was on a sprawling estate filled with separated parents and artistic types of people. These people, she felt, understood her problems, and they helped each other out with childcare and household chores, like they'd take turns cooking and things like that. And then while she was there a while, she was actually able to find a job in an advertising agency there, and did okay.
It almost sounds like a commune, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
So the Chambers lived far from Robert's schooling and events, and they decided to move to Manhattan from Jackson Heights. Phyllis found an apartment in a high-rise right on Park Avenue. Nice address. The place was small with low ceilings in the least fashionable section of Park Ave, but she did finally get her Park Avenue address.
That made her happy for a while.
For a while. Well, she moved from there, too.
But to be able to maintain this, she had to work constantly.
She did. When she wasn't working assignments as a nurse, she worked to raise money for St. David's. Robert was timid in Manhattan for the first couple of years, but he eventually made friends, and Phyllis seemed pleased to see that he was one of the popular boys. Now, the darker side of this is that by age 10, he began drinking alcohol and smoking pot. And at a birthday party for a fellow 10-year-old, some boys stole a birthday boy's piggy bank. At a birthday party for a fellow 10-year-old, some boys stole the birthday boy's piggy bank, and Robert was one of the thieves. Sometimes also Robert could get rough when he was playing with the other boys. But they wrote it off, saying that he'd been drinking too much and didn't realize how hard he was hitting. That's another astounding thing.
What?
This 10-year-old drinking enough.
Yeah, right?
That he hit too hard.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Well, just the fact of 10-year-olds drinking is kind of amazing to me.
It is.
That's so young. Jennifer was attending public school in California. Now she saw her father in New York during Christmas and summer vacations. He flew out west 3 or 4 times a year, so he's fairly involved. He's not totally abandoning his family. But his real estate business was doing very well. He bought a place between Madison and Park Avenues, and he had a new girlfriend. When Jennifer was 8, her father married his girlfriend, Arlene. Arlene was slim, glamorous, and she didn't have any children. So Jennifer really kind of looked up to her. The wedding was simple, and it was held at the New York City Hall. But for some reason, we don't know if it was because Ellen didn't want the girls to go, or because their father didn't invite them, but Jennifer and Darlene didn't attend their father's wedding.
I'm thinking it's because Mom didn't want them going.
Well, I don't know, because I really didn't see anything about how those two got along. So we don't know.
No, we don't. I'm just guessing. Robert grew more handsome as he got older. He was an altar boy at St. Thomas's Church, and he won a public speaking contest at St. David's. Phyllis talked about her son constantly. What a great kid.
He was the apple of her eye.
He was, and he was becoming everything she had wished he would be. Phyllis was invited to join the Gray's Board of Directors, a group historically reserved for high society women. She thrived in this. She made wealthy contacts and got donations for the organizations, and in 1979 she was elected their president.
Which was quite remarkable for a woman from her standing to become that. I kind of feel like she scratched and clawed her way, because she made some big moves in society for someone without
she did.
The backing. Yeah.
For a woman of her background, she did a lot.
Jennifer, meanwhile, was meeting celebrities at parties that her mom took her to, and also her sister went with them. Her mother often made big plans, and then the next morning, she'd be stoned and forget about her promises. So Ellen was getting into kind of the party drug scene. And I also get the feeling that Ellen was a bit promiscuous. She seemed to talk to Jennifer more like a friend than a mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robert's father, Bob, had attempted to quit drinking several times. He'd fall off the wagon each time, would spend his evenings making stops at the neighborhood bars. One of his favorite bars was Sheehan's. The son of the owner was a detective named Mike Sheehan. Now, Bob was a quiet, polite drunk, and Mike liked him. Bob often worked on a crossword puzzle, and Mike started calling him the intelligentsia. Mike shared stories of his adventures as a detective, and Bob complained about difficulties in his marriage. He never once mentioned to Mike that he had a son.
So that's strange.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And when Robert was 13, he complained to his friends that his mother expected too much of him, and he also didn't mention his father very much.
No.
Robert had many friends by then, and a lot of them were girls.
Even older girls.
Yeah.
Yeah. By 1979, Ellen Levin got tired of life in California, and she moved with her girls back east. She rented a house in the Long Island suburb of Port Washington. Jennifer was 11, and not thrilled with this move.
No. Not at that age.
No. Well, she was nervous about being the new girl in a new school, but once she got in there, she did make friends pretty easily. In the fall, she had started school at a public junior high school. She complained because her friends went to another school, and the one she was in was too cliquish. She had a lot of social anxiety, but then she ended up being one of the popular girls in the clique that she'd been complaining about.
So there. A 12-year-old girl who went to a private school that was located across the street from Robert's apartment visited him that year, and she was surprised to see a huge, elaborately framed portrait of him in the living room.
Yeah.
In the painting, he wore a blazer, a white dress shirt, and a tie, and he looked very much like a young prince, like young royalty.
So that gives you a pretty good idea of what Phyllis thought of her son.
No kidding. So she's looking at the painting and just kind of gawking at it, and Robert's getting more embarrassed about it because his mother had commissioned this painting.
Yeah, so that's a big deal. That's not cheap.
No.
Plus, it would kind of overwhelm the smallish apartment.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's something you'd see in the mansion.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Phyllis is working with Robert to get him accepted at one of the country's leading college prep schools, which at the time was Choate School in Wallingford, Connecticut. He received several recommendations from his lower school teachers, but his grades weren't impressive, nor were his aptitude testing scores. But because of the glowing recommendations and because he interviewed well, he was accepted at Choate, and this made him proud, and his mother even more proud.
Oh, she was beaming.
She was thinking, this is it.
Yeah.
Got him in.
He's on his way.
Yeah. But, and this is a big but,
Yeah.
Robert missed classes like crazy at Choate. He also began using cocaine, staying up late, sleeping well into the next day. And then Phyllis received a letter saying that he wasn't welcome back the next semester. She was quite upset. So he lasted one semester.
I know, that's awful.
She looked at other boarding schools, but she eventually decided to let him live at home and go to a private school in the city.
So I feel like she wouldn't even have considered public school.
No, there's no question.
No. Even if she had to work 20 hours a day, he was going to private school.
He was going to, if it couldn't be the best school, it could be a better school.
Well, and as Robert gets older, her expectations just keep lowering and lowering.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do this.
Yeah.
So I can almost feel sorry for her in that regard.
Friends often wondered how Phyllis afforded all the things that she provided to Robert. Trips abroad, the private schools, an occasional limo. Now, she worked constantly, but these were luxuries that were usually afforded to only the very wealthy. Now, Robert spent the summer of 1981 in Europe. When he returned, he started his freshman year at Browning, which is an all-male prep school in Manhattan.
Jennifer was continuing in public school, but her grades had begun to fall. She'd been dispelled from the popular crowd, and she told her friends that the girls were spreading rumors there about her. So she's starting to have some difficulties.
She is, but she had some learning issues.
She did, yes. And she had a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. Now, Robert was hanging out with a crowd of kids that turned out to be much wealthier than he.
Well, she's putting him in these situations where everybody else is rich.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
even
tough.
at Browning, which was a step down, it was still a pretty exclusive school.
It's a prep school in Manhattan. It can't be cheap.
Nope. So Robert was bragging that his mother was a doctor and that his father was the president of a record company. Drugs were a big part of their weekends. One girl's housekeeper sold cocaine to them, as did a tutor, who gave many of the kids private lessons. All they needed was money, which they all had plenty of, except for Robert.
So I guess this would be the reason he started stealing things, or part of it at least?
Part of it.
To keep
I
up?
think the big thing was to be one of the crowd.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
But it's also fulfilling something else in him.
Yes, and it's buying drugs. And he seems to be lacking in any kind of conscience. Like, he just feels entitled. I think he's been raised to feel so entitled to everything.
His mother was doing that.
Well, and as he got older, girls were doing that because he was attractive. He got a lot of attention. He got away with a lot for his looks.
He did. So at one party, Robert was seen going through the guests' coat pockets. And at another one, he was seen opening drawers in the parents' bedroom. Now, neither of the girls who saw him do this confronted him. Just became known that Robert stole things. But he continued to be invited to parties.
Yeah, he was still one of the kids, and he was cute. So that's all it took.
So Bob went away for rehab another time, again. And while he was away, Phyllis and Robert moved to a new apartment. This was a very prestigious address, East 90th Street off Fifth Avenue. Phyllis is finally getting to where she wants to be.
Do you feel like Phyllis was stealing? And where's the money coming from? I know she was frugal, and she called in a lot of favors, but I kind of wonder if she was stealing.
Well, that would be a good thought, because it's an expensive lifestyle.
It sure is. And maybe...
And your husband's in rehab,
Mm-hmm.
so there's not a lot of income coming in there.
No.
And she's a private duty nurse.
Right.
So even working for the wealthy, she probably was still in need of money.
Well, I would think at best she could support a solid middle class lifestyle.
But this wasn't. This was solid upper class.
Yeah, right?
So the building they moved into was just an elegant place. Black and white marble in the lobby, bronze chandeliers, bronze light fixtures, dark wood furniture. The actual apartment itself had once been a mansion library. It had wood-paneled walls and a large fireplace. So Phyllis took the front bedroom, Robert got the back one. Now, appearances were so important to Phyllis that she spent her own money to install a ficus tree in the lobby and to plant impatiens in the sidewalk plot. Meanwhile, back at school, there's a rash of vandalism and robberies that year. During a winter ski trip, a friend of Robert's raped a girl who was so drunk she had to be hospitalized. There is a teacher at Browning who had her purse stolen that spring, and a week later, Phyllis found the teacher's credit cards in Robert's room. Now, Robert got out of this by claiming that a friend of his had stolen the purse. He showed no emotion and didn't apologize, and he was expelled from Browning. So he lasted a year at this school.
So this is a crushing blow to Phyllis.
Isn't it?
But she did call the school when she found the credit cards, so that makes me think maybe I'm wrong to say she was a thief. Maybe she was following the rules.
Yeah, although you could also say that this was a black mark on her.
Yeah, but she could have kept it secret, is what I'm saying.
Well...
If she was really crooked.
Yeah, maybe. But I think it was something was going to be found out anyway.
Oh, okay.
Maybe she was trying to get ahead of it.
Yeah, maybe he was going to use them.
Yeah, of course he was.
Bad. Yeah.
So prep school was what Phyllis always had wanted for Robert, and this was going to be followed by an Ivy League college. So Phyllis thought that he had stole a purse to buy drugs, and she sent him off to rehab. And she didn't want her friends to know, so she kept it quiet.
So, I mean, this could have been a genetic thing. Bob is an alcoholic, which you said is, got a genetic component. So, I mean, Robert had some kind of genetic predisposition to, being an addict. To
addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Robert returned from his stay at rehab, Phyllis was able to get him into another prep school called York Preparatory. This was a co-ed school on the Upper East Side. And the summer after, she got Robert a job with a Wall Street firm of Davis, Polk, and Wardwell. She called one of the firm's partners, and as a favor, he got Robert in. And Robert's job was to run copier machines and deliver messages.
Now, Jennifer was the class clown. Like most teen girls, she was very insecure about her weight and her looks. Once in a while, she cut class with a group of kids, and they smoked pot in a friend's basement. She went to camp in the Adirondacks that summer. When camp ended, she moved into her father and stepmother's house in Manhattan.
So she's moved out of Mom's house.
Yes. And I think Mom was kind of irresponsible.
Yeah.
I don't know the details, but I think that was part of it.
Mom was living on Long Island, and that's not a cool place.
True.
Better to live in Manhattan.
Do you think that mattered to Jennifer at that age?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they were living in a pretty cool place. They had an apartment in Soho where they'd renovated this huge loft. Steve and Arlene had created a room for Jennifer where she got to pick her own furniture and colors. They took her to visit high schools, and she decided on Baldwin. That's a West Side private school that was known for helping students who had some learning disabilities.
And we don't know exactly what her learning disabilities were.
No.
I'm guessing she had attention deficit disorder.
She was kind of hyper, so that would fit.
And maybe some dyslexia or something like that. But we don't know for sure, just that they existed.
Yes. So they were hoping that this school was going to help her perform better and get her to prepare for college. So by the time Jennifer's 14, she'd filled out and she started showing off her figure, wearing tight jeans and tops. She shaved part of her head and spiked her hair in a popular punk look. After just a few weeks at Baldwin, she had a really large group of friends. They spent time after school in Central Park, playing frisbee or just hanging out. Her first boyfriend was Brock Pernice, a grandson of famous Broadway producer Alexander Cohen. He took her to a Billy Idol concert, and they went out dancing at the Peppermint Lounge. So these kids get to go out and do stuff when they're young.
Don't they?
Yeah. They have pretty active social lives.
I was amazed. So that same fall, Robert turned 16, and he's often surrounded by girls. They just flocked to him. Parties, girls would come up to him and flirt with him, while the other boys were looking on with envy. Robert was often in Central Park, drinking and using drugs. And sometimes he got so drugged out that he hallucinated, where he'd talk loudly to a lamppost or a tree. There was even a group of girls there who called him the boy who talks to lampposts.
Yeah.
But he was cute, so he got away with things.
Yeah, it's just like cute trumps everything in this crowd, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Cute is up there.
Yeah.
Wealthy is up there.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Now, Bob, meanwhile, was off the booze, and he began to realize that his son was headed down a bad road. Well, yes. Phyllis, however, refused to admit that Robert had a problem, even though some of his friends had said he was no longer welcome in their homes. She just kept saying he would straighten out soon. So Phyllis had hopes that Robert would mature and change his ways in college. She refused to accept that he was not the promising child of her dreams. When his school sent out a questionnaire asking her which colleges her son would be applying to, she wrote down Dartmouth, Brown, Duke, and Columbia.
High aspirations.
Very high aspirations, even in the 80s.
Yeah.
She also mentioned that she had pulled at 3 of these very competitive schools.
Yeah, that was her thing.
Yeah. I know so-and-so.
Right.
He can help out.
She did a lot of that.
Yeah.
It was in 1982 when Jennifer and her friends began going to Studio 54. It wasn't unusual for 14-year-olds to go and party there. The place had fallen on hard times since their massive popularity in the 70s, and they reopened in 1981 under new management. They went out and distributed free and discounted passes at the high schools, and they allowed underage drinking as long as the teens had false IDs. So the teens saw this as a glamorous place. This is a place where the girls would get all dressed up to go to.
Yeah. And you could drink semi-legally. I mean,
Wow.
All you needed was your fake ID.
Yeah, they didn't really take the laws very seriously.
No.
No, she's at her dad's house now, though, so there are rules there. It's different where she was with her mom and she kind of just had free reign. She wasn't allowed to go out on weeknights at all, and she had to let him know where she was all the time when she went out. But if he called to check on her, she always was where she said she would be, so he trusted her.
Yeah, she was responsible.
Pretty much.
I mean,
she's participating in some risky behavior, but most of the kids she's with are doing the same thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
The herd mentality.
Yes, this is the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Bob Chambers, after he gets out of rehab, he wasn't able to find a job like he'd had before, so he ended up taking a job at a local liquor store. Phyllis, meanwhile, still lived her life like a wealthy member of high society. She would decorate her apartment building lobby with 2 enormous poinsettia trees for the holidays. The sconces and chandelier in the interim had disappeared from the lobby after a burglary. Now, several people suspected that Robert and his friends were responsible for the burglary, but nothing ever came of that.
Well, there were a lot of burglaries at Robert's friends' apartment buildings and at his building. There were a lot of things that made you think Robert and probably a group of other kids were robbing apartments.
Well, yeah.
In October 1983, some of Jennifer's girlfriends from Port Washington came to visit her in the city. They had fun with Jennifer, but they felt like she'd changed, and she kind of viewed them as hicks from outside the city. She thought she was more sophisticated. They also noticed that Jennifer drank quite a bit. At one party, Jennifer and one of her city friends shared an entire bottle of vodka. And then the next night, she came home so drunk that her father grounded her. So, we say she's responsible, but she's getting into some trouble.
Yeah, what is she, like 15 years old here?
14 or 15.
14 or 15?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not exactly heading down the right road.
No.
Now, meanwhile, Phyllis was dealing with Robert's problems by getting more involved in the Catholic Church. But to some of her fellow Catholics, her views were very disturbing.
She said some horrible things.
Huh. Well, here's a great one.
All right.
She told one Catholic friend that the Jewish people died in the Holocaust because they had turned their backs on Christ.
Right.
That's just an absolutely incredible statement.
Yeah, like their lives didn't matter because they weren't Catholic. Pretty sick. And this even shocked the fellow Catholics she told it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they didn't know how severe and how messed up she was. In 1984, Jennifer and her friend Joan were really going boy crazy. They were in love with Billy Idol, and they would exchange notes about having a threesome with him. And they talked about boys all the time. When she turned 16, she became obsessed with losing her virginity. She thought that if she had sex, she would finally experience real love.
Yeah, that's, I think, kind of a typical teenage dream.
Yeah, she was kind of mixing things up.
Well, yes.
Yes.
But if I have really good sex, that means I'm really in love. And that's the thinking.
Yeah, it was. But her first sexual experience ended in misery, because she found the boy flirting with another girl at a party just a few days after she had sex with him. And she got really upset. She screamed at him and ran off crying. So after that, she kind of felt heartbroken and confused.
Yeah. Well, I've given my body to you. We're in love. And then the thought that he's flirting with a woman, another girl, just days after having sex, that'd be a big blow.
Yeah. Well, it was. It really was.
So Robert's in his senior year of high school, private high school. The headmaster at his school called Phyllis to let her know that Robert might not graduate. He was not doing his work, and, even worse, was not trying to improve the situation. The headmaster hated calling Phyllis with bad news because she was a very concerned parent and was always volunteering on school committees. So she was one of the the big movers and shakers in the school.
Very involved. I mean, she gave helicopter parent a whole new meaning.
Definitely. So over the spring of 1984, Robert was kept late in school detention in an effort to get him to pass his classes and graduate. So he did graduate, sort of. He dressed in a cap and gown and walked in the ceremony, but his diploma case was empty. He hadn't completed his work despite all the detention days to do that, and he'd have to make up his work in summer school. But it didn't concern him. He celebrated with his classmates at a huge graduation party with a reggae band. He ended up getting drunk as girls hugged and kissed him and giggled around him.
Now, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think I do. I don't think he should have been allowed to go to a party for graduation when he hadn't completed his work and he wasn't graduated. That's giving him the wrong message totally.
Well, yes, it is. I mean, at the same time, you don't want him to feel like he's being singled out.
I sure do. He's not being responsible. He didn't complete his work. He doesn't get to celebrate graduating when he didn't graduate. It's not like he failed because he couldn't. He failed because he didn't try.
Well, you're a harsh woman.
No, I think that's wrong to let him go to a party.
Yeah, well, he went.
I know that. So you disagree with me, I guess. You think
A
she
little.
should have let him do that?
I think she should have. I think...
Even get drunk and stay out late at night?
Okay, we'll leave that. But I'm looking at it as you didn't really graduate. You have all this work to make up to graduate. You're going to certainly do that. And I'll let you go to the party to celebrate with your friends. Now, we know in retrospect that's not going to work. But I can see at the time you say, okay.
Yeah, but he's had so many chances.
And she's enabling him. She's always done this.
Yes.
So there's no way she was going to say, you can't go.
Well, I really think she should have. Or maybe he could go to, like, the dinner and then he had to be home at 8 or something. I wouldn't let him enjoy the party as if he had done the work he was supposed to do. That's all.
Right. Now, according to Phyllis's thinking, girls were the root of Robert's problems. So Phyllis went out and found him a summer job. He didn't. He ended up working on a yacht, scrubbing the decks and polishing the woodwork. But the owner of the yacht soon noticed there were missing bottles of champagne and other liquors. The owner suspected Robert, but she knew Phyllis and didn't want to say anything. So there's a conundrum. But then one day he didn't show up for work, so he got fired. And he did actually go to summer school, and in the fall he managed to be accepted at Boston University.
But I would think that's mostly because of Phyllis, not because of Robert.
No, it isn't.
I mean, she's the kind of mom who probably did his homework.
Well, she did his work.
Right, yeah.
So she might have had a very active hand in doing his homework.
I bet she did. But Jennifer was getting into trouble at this time, too. She got really heavy into partying. And all the teens were just getting drunk. Cocaine was abundant. There was a lot of indiscriminate sex. And the parents didn't seem to be supervising their teenagers in this crowd. Either they were out themselves, or they were afraid to tell their kids no. They all wanted to be their kids' friends, which I believe is a big mistake.
But we know that.
Yeah.
So Robert goes to BU and he's complaining. It's got a dull, repetitious curriculum. He started out enthusiastic about attending school in Boston, but it didn't last.
No, maybe it lasted a week or two.
Yeah. He wasn't keeping up with his basic studies courses. He was partying a lot, drinking, doing coke. And he lasted a semester, said he didn't like it there and didn't want to return, but he had basically flunked out. Now, Phyllis told friends that Robert had gotten into trouble because some girl put marijuana in his room. The girl had been jealous that he wasn't paying attention to her, and she said he can't help it that girls find him so attractive. Now, what she failed to mention was that Robert had stolen a roommate's credit card to go out and buy himself dinners.
No, she didn't mention that to her friends, and I really can't blame her.
No, that's not something you're going to talk about.
No.
So by the fall of 1985, Robert was becoming more and more obsessed with cocaine and money. He did enroll at Hunter College in New York City, rarely attended class. He started freebasing.
Now, freebasing, that's smoking cocaine in a pipe?
Yeah.
That's what caught Richard Pryor on fire.
It did.
So that's heavy duty. That's pretty much as bad as injecting heroin.
That's
if not worse.
A major move.
Yeah. That's not just going out and doing some party drugs.
Right. Now, this takes money to finance your drug abuse, right? So Robert came up with a plan where he'd go home with women and he would fix their front doors so he would stay unlocked while he went into their bedrooms with them. So he's in there having sex with the girl, and his buddies would come in and steal things.
It's not a nice thing to do at all.
No.
No. In Jennifer's senior year, she tried more drugs, including ecstasy and LSD. And then she had sex with several young men. Her college admission scores were very low, and she was fighting a lot with her father and her new stepmom. She was also really unhappy with her mom, because Ellen acted more like a girlfriend than a mother, and Jennifer said she was really unreliable. I mean, she'd get high and then not show up for things, and she didn't really feel like she had a mom.
No, the stepmom was more of a mom to her than her mom was.
Now, one night around this time, Jennifer was at Dorian's Red Hand with friends, and she saw a good-looking guy at the bar, and she asked her friend who it was. It was Robert Chambers. "He's gorgeous," Jennifer said. She heard stories about how he'd had a hard life and how he was a real troublemaker, and of course this fascinated her. The girls loved the troublemakers.
Kind of like those bad boys, right?
Yes. So she actually went up to him and gave him her number. She told him that there was just something about him, something really special, and she asked him to call her. So Robert took Jennifer to the Hard Rock Cafe. They fooled around that night, but Robert couldn't get an erection, so they didn't have sex, and that was probably because he drank and did so many drugs.
Yeah, that can mess up your ability to perform.
He was embarrassed, and he didn't call her back for a while after that. But when a friend of Jennifer's was planning a party a few weeks later, Jennifer convinced her friend to invite Robert to the party. And she was really excited to see him there, but he didn't even remember her. After Jennifer graduated from high school and Robert returned to New York after another stay at rehab, they saw each other at Dorian's again. A friend of Jennifer's told her that Robert had just said she was the best-looking girl in the world. They hadn't spoken since the party back in February, so Jennifer was really surprised and happy. Before we get into the details, though, of these events that lead up to the murder, let's take a minute to tell our listeners about today's sponsor, Freshly.
Now, support for today's show comes from Freshly. Are you tired of spending hours preparing dinner or trying to master those multi-step meal kits? Cooking can be fun, but some days you just want a delicious, healthy meal with no effort. And Freshly is the new way to get dinner on the table in virtually no time.
Their chefs cook and deliver these delicious, freshly prepared meals so you can eat healthier without any of the work. Each meal is made to order just for you. And with a rotating weekly menu of more than 30 options, there's always something new to try. Better yet, Freshly's chefs and nutritionists make sure that every meal is all natural, nutritious, and made with only high-quality ingredients. So you can come home late from a long day at work and still have a delicious chef-cooked meal waiting for you.
Jill and I recently tried the Southwest Veggie Bowl, and we came away really impressed with its quality. It's got great grains, lentils and quinoa, along with corn, black beans, and sweet potatoes. All the things we like. Super filling, and has a nice little spicy kick.
So, to me, this is like bringing Downton Abbey lifestyle to us simple, down-to-earth folks. It's like having your own chef, really. Order Freshly today and see what it's like to put zero effort into making dinner. Go to freshly.com/brewery to get $20 off your first 6 dinners. That's $20 off plus free shipping at freshly.com/brewery. So in the summer of 1986, Jennifer had sex with Robert Chambers. She got on the phone the next day and excitedly told her girlfriends. They had gone to his mother's apartment because Phyllis had been working overnight. She said that Robert was great. He was sweet and gentle. It was the best sex ever. It was the second week of July, and she felt like her life was just going great. She had college plans, and now she felt like she had a new boyfriend. But Phyllis was complaining to Robert that he was lazy, and she was trying to get him to go out looking for a job at this time.
Phyllis got Robert a job painting the apartment of a neighbor. So you can see, we've come down a few notches here from working in a stockbroker's office to painting.
Pretty much now it's just anything.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about this is that one morning Phyllis was seen wearing work clothes and moving furniture in the neighbor's apartment. So Robert's still asleep. Phyllis is preparing the room so that when he woke up, he would find it easier to start the job.
Ridiculous.
Holy shit.
Ridiculous. Oh, my God.
Get your lazy ass out of bed.
Right,
and
I know.
Do the work that they're paying you for.
But in Phyllis's defense, where's Bob? He's not doing anything. So, I mean, we can bash Phyllis, and it's easy to do. I don't mind doing it either, but Bob should have some kind of responsibility letting his son act like this. This is bullshit.
He should. But I think Bob is the kind of guy that is just going to curl up with his bottle, and he's going to let his wife
Well, he's
run
off the
things.
booze at this point.
Well,
I don't know. I'm just saying. It's not all Phyllis. There are two parents.
there are, but Bob is kind of checked out.
Yeah, right. Which is not okay.
So it's just Phyllis.
Right.
And she's fucking up.
She is. Jennifer's working at a restaurant, and she's saving money for school in September. She had some other guys she hooked up with over the summer, but Robert was the one she found the most exciting, and he was still prominent in her mind. She was afraid she wouldn't hear from him again, but when she returned from her orientation at Chamberlain, I think is the name of the school, it was a weekend in Boston, and when she came back, there were messages from him on her machine. So she was just super flattered. He didn't have to do much to please her. So she called him right back. Then on August 25th, 1986, she had dinner with her friend Alexandra and Alexandra's dad. They made arrangements with friends for the rest of the evening. They'd go to a Mexican cafe with their friends Laura and Larissa, and then the four girls would go to Dorian's and meet up with some other friends. As they got ready, Jennifer talked about Robert, and she paid special attention to her appearance. She borrowed a white camisole, a pink and white miniskirt, and a pair of white bikini panties from Alexandra, as well as some makeup. Now at Juanita's, Jennifer had a margarita, and she said she hoped she would see Robert at Dorian's. She debated about whether she would walk right up and kiss him, or if she would hold back and see what happened, see if he approached her. But they were having a great time, laughing and sharing advice. While Jennifer and her friends were at Juanita's, Robert was already outside of Dorian's, and he was smoking a joint with a friend. He said he had no money, no job, and he kept falling off the wagon. A friend suggested that he go home, but Robert said no, he wanted to hang out and meet his girlfriend. Her name was Jo Perry. Jennifer and her girlfriends arrived there around midnight, and they were sipping champagne from a bottle they brought with them. The scene was very festive, and there were two bartenders there serving drinks to everyone.
Yeah, and Jennifer was looking around. She saw a lot of kids that she knew, but she was looking specifically for Robert. So she entered the back porch area and saw Robert at a table with some people she didn't know. So she goes up to Robert and starts talking to him about her trip to California. And Robert, meanwhile, is ignoring her and making faces and just starts talking to a guy at his table. So he's just brushing her off.
Totally dissed her, yeah. She walked away, but she didn't give up. She said she'd try and talk to him later. When she went back to his table about 10 minutes later, he actually got up and walked away. Now, she didn't follow him, but she got up and talked to some other people she knew. The girl who was supposed to meet up with Robert there, Jo Perry, was angry when she saw Jennifer approaching Robert the third time. She went over and yelled at Robert, and she threw a package of condoms from her purse at him and told him, "You can use these with someone else."
Everybody's laughing, including Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
So Jennifer walked away and started flirting with another guy. And Robert, meanwhile, is looking pretty angry, but at the same time, he's ignoring both Jennifer and his sort of date, Jo.
So Jennifer was pretending not to care, but she looked close to tears to her friends. And her girlfriend Alexandra told Jennifer to just forget about him. But she didn't want to. She really had a crush. She decided to stay at Dorian's and see if they might end up together after all. Her friend Alexandra left, and Jennifer lingered on, and then Jo went home alone around 3:45. So by that time the bar's pretty empty, and finally Robert approaches her, and she's just thrilled, you know. They talked for several minutes, and he asked her to leave with him. So she agreed, and about 4:30, looking happy, she said goodbye to several friends, and she left the bar with Robert.
Then 2 hours later, a bicyclist found Jennifer's lifeless body under a tree in Central Park. The cyclist called 911 from a street corner at 6:15 in the morning, When police arrived and took a closer look at the scene, it looked like Jennifer had been strangled. She had bruises on her face and neck. The way her clothes were all shoved up her body indicated to police that she had been raped.
And this was shocking because she was very well dressed, well kept up, and looked really young. So this wasn't your typical, not that there's a typical murder victim, but, she didn't look like someone who would be out on the street in the middle of the night.
No. One of the bystanders was a lady named Susan Bird. She had been running near the Metropolitan Museum of Art with a friend when she heard sirens and saw a police car pull into the grass. So she stopped and watched. She noticed that there was a young man who was also watching while he sat on a stone wall. And this guy caught Susan's attention because he was watching so intently, and he had these strange long scratches on his face.
When Alexandra woke up the next morning, she wondered where Jennifer was because Jennifer had been staying with her. She assumed she'd spent the night with Robert, so she got up and left for the DMV. She was supposed to go get her driver's permit that day. Steve Levin was in his office when 2 detectives came into the reception area. Steve came out, and they said they wanted to talk to him privately, so they walked into the conference room. This is when detectives told Steve that they believed his daughter had been killed. They showed him a picture of her face that had been taken with a Polaroid in the park. So this is just horrible for a father to see. It's the worst day of Steve's life. Alexandra returned home around 10 a.m., and the key she'd left for Jennifer was still under the mat, so she's starting to get a little worried. She calls Jennifer's number, where Jennifer had a separate phone at the house, but Steve answered the phone. The police quickly got on the phone and said they were coming over to ask questions about Jennifer. So Alexandra's wondering if Jennifer got in some kind of trouble with drugs or something.
Exactly. Now, it didn't take long for the police to arrive at Robert's apartment. In the meantime, he had showered and gone to bed, and he had told Phyllis that their cat had scratched his face, so she applied peroxide to the scratches. Now, the police were at their apartment, and they wanted to talk to Robert about a missing girl. Soon as Robert came out of his room and the police saw his face, they're thinking, this guy could have done it.
Yeah, they liked him for this.
Now, Robert gave the police his spiral phone book, which had the names and numbers of many of Jennifer's friends. Then he was taken down to the police station for questioning. He told his mother that he was going to help the police. He initially denied that he was with Jennifer. Well, that's going to be easily proven wrong, because everybody saw him leave with her.
Right, yeah.
But then his story changed. So his explanation that the cat scratched him fell apart under questioning, and he admitted killing Jennifer.
Pretty easily, but then he had this whole story.
Yeah, but the story he told police was blaming Jennifer for trying to have her way with him, and it was a shocking and graphic story. Robert claimed that rough sex in the park had gotten out of control, Jennifer was hurting him, and to make her stop, he hit her in the neck and ended up killing her. Besides his hand injury and the scratches on his face, police also found several large scratches on his chest.
This is just kind of a theme in Robert's life that, girls are just making his life hard because he's
women.
So damn attractive he
That's
can't
right.
help it.
I can't help what women do around me.
So hearing that his son was being questioned in a murder was, of course, very disturbing for Bob Chambers. Mike Sheehan met him outside at the police station and was trying to console him. Now, he knew him from the bar. Bob got on his knees in the parking lot and recited the Serenity Prayer, because he's been on the wagon for a while.
Fat lot of good that's going to do.
Well, it keeps him from drinking. That's what they do it for.
Okay.
Yeah. Robert said that Jennifer forced his pants down, sat on his face, and began to play with his genitals. He said she hit his penis with a stick and squeezed his testicles. So he was in incredible pain, and he reached down, forcing her off of him with his arm around her neck. He admitted that he'd been pissed off when Jennifer laughed at him at Dorian's. Then he was angry again when she scratched his face. But he had forgiven her, he said. Then she began giving him a massage in the park and told him that she wanted to tie him up, and that's when the assault against him began. So Mike Sheehan took Robert into the bathroom and looked at his genitals for any signs of an assault. But there were no traces, there was no scratching, no redness, no injuries to his genitals that could be seen.
No, and, to the police and to me, this is just an outrageous story.
It really is, I know.
Come on. Robert pointed out that he had been hurt, He injured a bone in his right hand when Jennifer pushed him to the ground after tying him up. And I don't know if we mentioned, but he said she tied him up with her panties, right?
Yeah, I think that was it.
So after he pushed her off, he claimed to have waited 5 to 10 minutes for her to move, but she hadn't. So he knew there was nothing he could do to help her, so he went home, showered, and fell asleep.
Sure, what else are you going to do, right?
Well, that's it. I'm not going to call the police or anything.
No, she's not moving, so I'm tired. I'm going home.
Now, Robert's story didn't match the injuries the police had seen on Jennifer. Her neck was swollen, discolored, and had bled, so it doesn't look like it was just a single blow or push to the neck. It looked like she had been actively strangled.
Yeah, his story really isn't matching up.
Not in the least.
Now, while Robert was at the police station, Phyllis's maid was sorting through his dirty clothes, because of course he didn't do his own laundry either.
Well, no, that's what the maid's for.
Right. She had a big bag of underwear and undershirts, but she remembered that Phyllis had had his dark clothes in a shopping bag, but she never brought them over as she normally would. She tossed in a handful of whites in the washer, and she saw a white baseball shirt that was covered in dirt stains and blood. She wondered how Robert had gotten it so dirty, but then she shrugged and went ahead and put it in the wash.
Now, after Robert confessed, his father Bob was let in to see his son. Robert stood up and threw his arms around his dad. Then he said, "That fucking bitch, why didn't she leave me alone?" Now, Bob would say later that he didn't hear his son say any of that. He only heard his son sobbing, and he is speaking to Robert in a soothing voice.
Yeah, so what do you think about that? That's a horrible thing to say.
It sounds like you're turning against your kid. He says one thing, and his father says he never said that to me.
Yeah, but why would you want to say that he said that to him? Because he's calling her a bitch.
Yeah, but that's part of his defense. Yes, I killed her, but it was self-defense because she is having rough sex with me.
Well, yeah, but I think the whole thing of Robert saying that is really bad for Robert, and that Bob denying hearing it is defending his son. That's how I see it.
Do you?
Yeah, because he's calling her a fucking bitch and she just died? Absolutely.
No, I'm looking at it as part of his defense. If she had only left me alone, I wouldn't have killed her.
Yeah, I don't see it that way. That's interesting that we see that so differently.
And his father says he never said that to me.
Yeah, I see that totally differently than you do. But anyway, about an hour later, Robert was taken on what they call the Perp Walk. It was around 2 a.m. With his hands cuffed. He's walked from the precinct building to a nearby van. So this is kind of a courtesy with the press to give them a chance to get some photos.
Good photos.
Yep. On the way to Central Booking, Robert had been taken to the hospital where his bites, scratches, and hand injury were examined, and he was given some ice and some antibiotics.
Superficial scratches.
Yeah, now we'll find out this lawyer he gets is a super good lawyer.
Yeah, this is a kind of a clash of titans. So Jack Littman was the lawyer. He was one of the best criminal defense attorneys in New York City. Before going into his own private practice, he had worked for the DA's office. He had tried 40 cases and lost just one. And on the morning of August 27th, when Robert was booked, Littman was at the height of his career. He'd been in private practice for 12 years, handling cases from securities fraud to murder. In his most famous ones, he had represented a Brooklyn policeman who shot an unarmed black man and got an acquittal for him. He got an acquittal for a Bronx policeman who shot 2 unarmed Hispanic men. He also got charges dismissed in a big insider trading case.
So if anyone's going to get Robert off, this would be the guy.
This is the guy to talk to.
He'd also been really successful in getting lesser charges for clients accused of murder. One was a 17-year-old who'd reportedly bashed his girlfriend's head in with a rock. Littman had persuaded the jury that his client had just pushed the girl away from him and she fell and hit her head on a rock. His most famous case to date was that of Richard Herron, a Mexican-American who had won a scholarship to Yale, and then he'd hammered to death Bonnie Garland, a fellow Yalie who he had become obsessed with. Herron had confessed, and he even told police that he had begun thinking about killing her hours before the murder. But Littman was able to convince the jury that Herron had been suffering from extreme emotional disturbance, and he got Herron convicted on manslaughter instead of murder. This was pretty amazing.
Good lawyer.
Well, the way they found him is a friend of the Chambers contacted him, and he agreed to meet with Phyllis and Bob. Phyllis was really happy that he agreed to take the case, and Littman drove right over to Central Booking to talk to Robert right away.
Yeah. Well, there's a defense to be made or produced.
Well, of course.
Plus, there's publicity.
Right. I'm sure that's a big thing, because this was a very highly publicized case.
It was. While the Chambers are getting a lawyer, Jennifer Levin's body was being examined at the medical examiner's office. Multiple bruises were noted. Big circular abrasion on her neck and a contusion above her right eyebrow. Another abrasion was below that right eye. One ear was cut, and there was a gouge in the left side of her chin. She had vertical scratches on her left cheek, more bruises and abrasions on her elbows, stomach, and inner thighs. It was clear by the medical examination that Jennifer had tried to defend herself from an attack. The vertical scratches on her face were believed to have resulted from her trying to remove something her assailant had put over her face, kind of like a gag. There was a laceration inside her upper lip that supported that, but it also could have come from a punch in the mouth. In the autopsy, the medical examiner learned that Jennifer had not been raped. Hemorrhages were found in her tongue and temples, which were different than the ones found in her eyelids. These were more substantial and suggested that her mouth and head had been punched, so it looked like she had been beaten and strangled.
As Jennifer's autopsy was being done, Robert's attorney was talking to him in his jail cell. He got the same story Robert had given the police. Robert told him that there wasn't any hostility between them, and Jennifer and he had a very casual relationship. Detective Mickey McEntee received a call that afternoon from a doctor who told him he ran every day in Central Park, and sometimes he noticed things. 2 nights earlier, he had seen 2 people lying on the ground in the area where Jennifer's body had been found. He said the couple was on the grass and they were rocking, maybe humping. It looked like they were doing something sexual, but he kept on running, so he wasn't a witness to the murder or the attack. Back at the Chambers apartment building, reporters and photographers were grouped around the door and ringing Phyllis's doorbell. But Phyllis was away. She was in a coffee shop that morning on Madison Avenue with her old friend Barbara Dermont. She was afraid she would be recognized, so she sat far in the back and faced away from the entrance. Now to Barbara, her friend looked totally crushed. She had red eyes, and she was trembling as she talked about what had happened in the park. But Phyllis referred to this as the terrible accident. She was clearly devastated, and she wasn't just worried about her son, she was also very worried about money. Of course, the attorney, Whitman, was very expensive. He charged between $250 and $300 an hour, depending on the case. If it was a long, complex case like this one, he usually billed at the lower end. When his young partner did the work, he charged $100 to $150 an hour. This is still terribly expensive.
It goes without saying.
And in addition, there are the expenses of private investigators and scientific experts. And she had to pay for all of their travel expenses as well.
Yeah, and they didn't have that kind of money. I mean, for all her pretensions, they couldn't even begin to afford this attorney. Now, eventually Phyllis would raise money from the people she had worked for. So one example is Dorothy Hammerstein. I guess that's of Rogers and Hammerstein.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. It was a really wealthy person, so I wouldn't be surprised.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
So she contributed $20,000. But Phyllis's first concern was to get Robert bailed out of jail. So Phyllis asked Barbara to go with her to Whitman's office. She was going to start a letter-writing campaign and a fundraising drive to raise bail money. When they got to Whitman's office, Phyllis made a list of friends and contacts who might write character references for Robert. She also made a list of people like Barbara who could help her with the actual work of getting the letters. Then there was a list of people who might contribute money. So she's clearly thought this through.
Well, she's good at raising money, and she always had used these pulls she had with the wealthy.
Yeah, and so she's doing it again.
She believed that even her friends who weren't wealthy could help, because they could take loans against their life insurance policies. So she's expecting a lot.
I think so.
I mean, Barbara thought this took a lot of nerve. But at the same time, she couldn't help but be impressed with how Phyllis was turning from a mournful parent to a take-charge strategic planner. When she got working, she didn't look sad anymore. She seemed to be able to push her emotions aside and just get down to work. But of course, Phyllis had some experience in getting Robert out of trouble.
So later that afternoon, Whitman had Barbara come to his office to talk with him. He asked Barbara how well she knew Phyllis and what her opinion was of how Phyllis would deal with the situation. Now, Barbara had known Phyllis for several years and knew her very well, and she said that she felt like Phyllis would survive whatever came at her.
A friend of Jennifer's visited Steve and Arlene Levin and brought them dinner. And as they ate, they had questions. They asked her, why did Jennifer go to the park with Robert? And why did she have so many friends calling? I mean, their phone had been ringing continuously for days. Jennifer's friend told them that Jennifer had trusted Robert because she knew him. But what she was thinking, and she didn't tell them, was that Jennifer was so desperate for attention and affection that she was always going out to other people to try and find that. She hadn't gotten it at home.
No, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
She's glommed on to Robert. She had sex with him once. Mm-hmm. He's the one.
Yeah. Jack Whitman went to court that night and, with Robert beside him, argued that his client should be released from jail immediately because he was guilty of nothing but an accident. He explained that Robert had killed Jennifer while reacting to sexual pain that she had caused him. So the press just loved this. This was no run-of-the-mill defense, self-defense in reaction to sex, rough sex. But the arraignment didn't go well. The judge ordered Robert back to jail pending a grand jury investigation. And some of the headlines at that time were, Jenny killed in wild sex. Sex got rough. They were just eating this whole thing up.
Oh, yeah, selling papers, right?
Yeah, but this was horrible for the Levin family. They were really hurt and angry. Jennifer was a victim, but she was being treated differently because she was a sexually active young woman. If she'd been a little virgin who hadn't gone out to the park willingly, if she'd been taken and she hadn't been drinking, she would have been treated differently.
No question.
She was definitely being re-victimized.
She was.
So the Levins are really hurt. They're really angry. At the same time, Jack Whitman is worried that the headlines could make the grand jury feel negatively about Robert. He filed a request that the grand jury not be allowed to read about the Chambers case while they were sitting. Still, it's impossible to shield them from the headlines.
Oh, totally.
And this is pre-internet, and every major corner in New York has at least one newspaper stand. Even the side streets have coin-operated newspaper machines, and the subways were filled with people flipping through the tabloids.
Yeah, you can't not be exposed.
No, you can't.
So detectives who testified to the grand jury were shocked and disgusted by some of the reactions to the testimony and evidence. One man actually snickered as he looked at the crime scene photos, like he was enjoying looking at Jennifer's nude body. And some of the questions were really gross, like, are there sticks in the park she could have hit his dick with? What did the panties look like? What style were they?
Yeah, really gross.
Oh, God.
Yes.
And Robert's friends from Dorian's were rallying around him, and they worried about how he was being treated. One girl actually told the press, there's nothing we can do for Jennifer now. We have to fight for Robert's rights.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? You don't like that?
No.
No, that's bad. I mean, Jennifer's dead.
Yeah.
At first, his supporters were praising him, telling each other what a great guy he was. But eventually, this actually took the form of criticizing Jennifer.
Yeah, well, you have to, right? I mean, if you're talking about what a superb guy the killer was, who's confessed to killing her, if you're talking about what a great guy he is, you have to vilify the victim.
This is just mind-blowing to me, though. Hostile rumors about her were just circulating like crazy. They said she was wild, so wild that her father had to lock her in a closet to control her. They said she was an exhibitionist, so much so that she'd pose for new photos. And I would just say, even if those things were true, she's not the one who killed somebody. She's innocent here.
Right.
Right. Well, a few of the guys who'd been at Dorian's on the night of the murder actually remarked that the bite marks on Jennifer's breasts may have been left there by other boys that she had engaged in rough sex with. So all these rumors are just abundant, and they're very cruel.
But that's how it was presented.
Absolutely it was. You're right.
So Jennifer's coffin was open from the waist up for her wake, and despite the mortician's thick makeup, anybody could see the bruises that were covering her face. And then the press coverage added insult to injury for those who had known and cared about Jennifer. A close friend of hers called up some of the girls who were quoted as rallying around Robert and screamed and cursed at them. She knew that his story about not laying a hand on her except to suddenly choke her couldn't be true. and her eye looked like it had been punched hard.
Yeah, she had far too many injuries for it to be one push.
It's way too inconsistent with what's described, right?
Right. Yeah, but his lawyer is able to convince the jury of a lot of things, it seems like. Don't you think?
Yeah, he earned his money.
So Jack Whitman, he sent his own pathologist over to the ME's office, and that pathologist confirmed what the district attorney was claiming. There were other marks on Jennifer besides the strangulation marks. The best he could hope for was to get Robert off with manslaughter at this point. While the grand jury was still out, a New York Post reporter managed to trick Robert into breaking his silence. He pretended to be a friend, not a journalist, and gained admission to see him. Robert told him, "I liked Jennifer. I liked her very much. I'm completely innocent. It was a total accident." And to this reporter, he said he sounded sincere and trustworthy, and he also seemed depressed and sad. He said his life in the jail wasn't too bad. The guards were treating him okay, and he got to play basketball. He spent a lot of time on his bunk thinking about his future. On September 10th, which was 2 weeks after Jennifer's death, Robert was indicted on 2 different counts of murder. One was intentional murder, and the other was murder committed under circumstances evincing a depraved indifference to human life.
The case for the prosecution was given to Linda Fairstein. She is a 39-year-old head of the sex crimes unit, and she had been lobbying hard for the case. Ended up being very happy to get the case. It was her first homicide. It was a high-publicity case, and she liked the limelight. Now, she's since become a famous author.
Yes, I know you've read several of her books.
I have read every single one of her books, and it's kind of autobiographical. It's fiction, but the protagonist of the book is a woman who heads the sex crimes unit for the district attorney's office. And I love the books. They're great stories, but they always give such great histories of New York. I learned a lot about Grand Central Station, about the Verrazano Narrows. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can learn about. So I think her books are wonderful. So the press loved Linda. Tall, good-looking blonde, dressed in high heels and tailored suits. So there's another sexist remark, isn't it? So Linda Fairstein was more open than many of her colleagues, and she liked to joke with reporters, and she was willing to tell her side of the story, both with facts and with colorful anecdotes. She had been in the DA's office since the 70s. There's a lot of chauvinism back in the day, but Linda Fairstein hadn't let that get her down. She worked hard. She prosecuted over 30 rape cases and lost just 2.
That's a pretty good record, yeah. But she was a nurturer, too. When she met with Jennifer's family, she told them that she knew Jennifer had fought for her life. She explained how she would convict Chambers, but she put off telling them just how formidable an opponent Jack Whitman was, because she knew it was going to be tough.
Very formidable.
The two had been friendly back when he was with the DA's office, so she knew him quite well. The motive for Jennifer's murder was eluding her, though. As she focused on the forensic evidence, she hoped the motive would become clearer in time.
On September 24th, there was a bail hearing for Robert. Whitman submitted a lengthy bail application, along with 40 letters gathered by Phyllis Chambers that attested to his character.
So Mom was working the phones.
Working like crazy. Some of the letters were from friends of Robert. One girl wrote that Robert was a sweet and sensitive young man, and another girl wrote that he had counseled her through some rough times with her parents. Some letters were also from friends of the Chambers family. Then we had letters from his teachers at St. David's and priests at the Catholic Church, all of which proclaimed he was honest and trustworthy.
Which I think it's safe to say that's not true.
Oh, total bullshit.
Because even if you disregard this whole case, he was a thief. He was quite dishonest.
He was.
But the most impressive letter was probably the one from the Archbishop of Newark. He wrote that Robert possessed a true respect for his neighbor and an unwillingness to cause pain. The judge gave high regard to this opinion.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, the Archbishop of Newark, this is New Jersey. It's not even New York. How does he even know Robert?
There was some kind of interaction that I read about in one of the books. I can't remember.
Yeah, but
he didn't really know him well.
No.
No, he didn't. That's a good point.
So, and Whitman also had packed his side of the courtroom with friends and relatives of the Chambers, which included a priest in full garb. Jeez. He was strategically placed in the front row alongside two young black men from the Greys. The priest had proposed that if Robert was released, he, the priest, would be personally responsible for Robert's future court appearances.
Well, Linda Fairstein was opposed to this.
Well, she doesn't want him out at all.
No. She checked into his background, and she knew that he was bad news. He was a longtime drug user and a thief. She had discovered that the police file on a burglary he had done was still open, and since he had been arrested for Jennifer's killing, evidence sufficient to indict him for the burglary had turned up. One of his fingerprints matched a print that had been lifted at a burglarized apartment. Robert Chambers is a thug and a murderer, she told the court. And the judge took the weekend to decide. Then on Monday he granted bail, but he set the amount at $150,000, and he made his second-grade religion teacher responsible for his court appearances. So this religion teacher is another person that really hadn't known Robert since he was little, but was saying what a great guy Robert is.
Yeah. I mean, Phyllis had worked the phones pretty well.
She was convincing people, that's for sure.
And Phyllis was in tears because she didn't have the money to bail out Robert. So Jack Dorian decided to put up his $600,000 East Side townhouse as collateral for the bail.
When Robert was released, the plan was to take him to Monsignor Leonard's church rectory, but the press had surrounded that place. So Robert was taken to a church-run home in Brooklyn until the coast was clear at the rectory. In October, Robert Whitman requested Jennifer's journal to adequately prepare his defense. Eventually, the court ruled that Fairstein didn't have to turn it over. She knew Whitman would want to use Jennifer's personal diary against her because she'd written about sexual experiences and sexual desires, things like that. Now, the judge's decision read that there was nothing in the document which was relevant and material to the defendant's case.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable.
That shouldn't have been used. So the prosecution developed a theory that Robert had tried to rob Jennifer, and that had been his motive to kill her. Detectives had observed that Jennifer's earrings had been removed from her ears. Now, there was no way to prove it, but her earrings and money had never been found, and there were pictures of her wearing those earrings at Dorian's earlier that night.
Well, yeah, that's a good theory.
Yeah, or he could have killed her and then just decided to take her things as an aside. He's that kind of guy.
That's my theory.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, my theory is that she really wanted to have sex with him, right? That's all she was aiming for.
Okay.
Well, maybe not
I would
all.
say intimacy, not just sex. I think she had a crush, but okay.
Yeah. And they get out there and they start trying to do it, but he's drunk or stoned or both, and he can't get an erection.
Right.
Which has happened before.
From what I read, yeah.
So... And she's maybe a little drunk, too. So she starts mocking him and making fun of him, and he loses his temper.
Or maybe not even mocking him, maybe just making one comment. I don't think it would take much.
No.
Right.
But I think that's what happened, that she said, can't even get a hard-on, and he lost it.
Yeah.
And she fought back, and he killed her.
And then do you think he purposely tried to make it look like a rape so that they'd blame some stranger in the park?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
And then just because he's that kind of guy, he took her stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's my working hypothesis.
I could go with that.
Now, Linda Fairstein felt like she had a good fix on who Robert Chambers was. She thought he was anti-Semitic. He used the word pushy about Jennifer and told police she was very Jewish. What is very Jewish?
It's a derogatory statement, I would guess.
Yeah, but what is it?
I don't know. He'd made comments about some of the Jewish girls being very princess-like and pushy and expecting a lot. That's all his interpretation, and I don't even want to go there. But you know what his mother said about the Jewish people in the Holocaust.
Yeah,
so.
If they hadn't turned their backs on Christ, they would have been saved.
Isn't that awful?
Just horrendous.
Yeah.
Now, Fairstein also suspected that Robert was a sociopath. He showed no conscience or morals. Her work on the case wasn't going as well as she'd hoped, though, and she is having trouble getting Robert's friends to cooperate. Many refused to either talk to her out of loyalty or because they had things to hide, because they don't want to expose themselves to all the things they were doing.
Well, yeah, they're all criminals, really.
She promised their parents that she would not prosecute them for their crimes, that she only wanted to convict a murderer. But it was pretty discouraging.
Yeah, most of them didn't care. They wouldn't talk to her.
Nope, they didn't.
20-year-old Kitty Schoen ran into Robert at a Valentine's Day party in 1987. Oh, it was a year since the last party where she'd seen him. So she said it was hard for her to face him, and after a while, though, she decided she was going to go talk to him because she wanted to hear directly from him what had happened to her friend Jennifer. And here's a short quote of what Robert said to her. "I'm sorry I ever met Jennifer. You know, she was flirting with me at Dorian's that night. She kept on doing it. She was becoming a pain in the ass. Jennifer begged me to come and visit her at school, and I said I wouldn't. That made her freak out. She scratched me, and I accidentally killed her. Well, my life is over too, because I'm going to die in jail. But I've got one thing going for me. There's a book and a movie being done about me. Do you think I should let Rob Lowe play me?"
Jesus.
So there's his track of thinking.
He's really a self-aware person, isn't he?
Yeah.
Pre-trial hearing started in May. Linda Fairstein still had not settled on a motive for Jennifer's killing. But she didn't have to have a motive because the law didn't require one. However, she knew that the jurors would like to have a motive.
Yeah, definitely.
So she consulted the FBI on establishing a motive, talking to their profile people. A psychologist told her that Robert had the same kind of personality as Ted Bundy. He was charming and an emotional vacuum. Killing was easy for him, and he could probably kill again. An FBI detective argued strongly that Robert had killed Jennifer and then positioned her body and clothes to make it look like a rape. Always said that. Another detective likened Robert's remaining near the park and watching the police to the habit of arsonists watching fires that they set. The crime excited him.
That makes sense to me, because why would he be there watching?
He wouldn't,
No.
if that was in fact him, but it probably was. I mean, they
Yeah.
saw a guy sitting there with scratches on his face.
Oh, yeah, I believe the woman did identify him later, that it was him. Yeah. Well, it was kind of impossible, though, to determine a precise motive. But the FBI detectives believed that any refusal from Jennifer would incite his rage. So it could have been sex or money. Also, like you said, if he was impotent and she laughed at him, he would become enraged.
That's what happened.
Phyllis's friend Barbara believed that parents formed their children, and if a parent was a manipulator, his or her child was likely to become one too. Robert saw himself as a victim. Jennifer made him kill her. His friends made him use drugs and burglarize houses. But to Barbara, Robert was a victim. Phyllis's victim.
Yes, that's
a good statement.
That's a great statement.
Over a year after Jennifer's death, Robert was painting and doing some carpentry work for a neighbor. He learned to use a computer, and he bought a new cat. He also went out on some dates. There was a whole group of girls from York Prep who'd been friends with Jennifer, but they still wanted to spend time with Robert. He was like a celebrity. Jury selection began in October. The judge ruled that all of Robert's statements to police on the night he was arrested could be admitted into evidence at his trial. So this made Linda Fairstein happy. The statements contained several remarks that he later admitted were lies. So the weekend before jury selection, the son-in-law and stepdaughter of Mrs. Murphy, an elderly neighbor who Robert had been working for, claimed that Robert had been stealing from her. They complained that he had bilked her out of $7,000 he'd given her in bills for work done on the apartment. He had forged her name on checks. And they said if he didn't stay away, they were going to contact the DA. Now, I don't know why they would even warn him. I would just call the DA.
Just call the police, right?
Yeah, but Robert stood up to them. He confronted them in his mother's apartment, and this made Phyllis hysterical. She said she was going to check into a psych ward or jump out of the window. But Robert was just blasé, saying, well, it's my word against theirs. Like he was totally oblivious that his word was really not regarded well, and that he was in a bad situation here.
No, totally out of it. Now, it took 8 weeks to pick a jury. That's an incredibly long time. 4 of the jurors were women, 8 were men. 3/4 of the jurors were in their 20s or early 30s. Both Whitman and Fairstein wanted jurors young enough so they wouldn't be too judgmental. And we're going to get him on trial after New Year's of 1988.
Yeah, so this is when the party happens, right before that.
Yeah, let's go through that.
Okay. So 19-year-old Melissa Bushell gave a party. She invited several girlfriends, and she also invited Robert Chambers. He was an old acquaintance from York Prep. Melissa had dreams of becoming an actress or a model. She loved to dress up and take pictures. She had recently bought a Panasonic video camera. As she prepared for her party, she got out her camera, and when her friends arrived, she suggested that they make a movie. Melissa gave her girlfriends costumes to wear, so they were mostly wearing negligées and stylish silk pajamas. They were dancing around the living room when Robert arrived, and he had a girlfriend with him named Shawn. Shawn put on a black nightgown and joined in with the girls. Between takes, they all drank beer and whiskey, and some smoked pot. Several of the skits they performed had this sadomasochistic overtones, with plots developed by Robert, of a boy being taunted by females. In one skit, Robert was a little boy caught reading dirty magazines by a librarian. Some of this seemed to be drawn from real-life experiences, as he got out of trouble by flirting and by lying to women. Pretending to play a game of charades, he mimed the title of Death of a Salesman, and then he acted out a choking scene. He grabbed one of Melissa's dolls for this and twisted off its head. And then he laughed and said, "Oops, I think I killed it." Now, a lot of these girls had been friends with Jennifer, but they laughed at this. Melissa would eventually, though, give this tape to a current affair for $10,000.
Money talks, baby.
Yes.
Now, in her opening statement at the trial, when it did finally get underway, Linda Fairstein said that Robert had lied. There was no sex in the park that morning, only violence and death. Whitman tried to keep the crime scene photos away from the jury, but he failed at that. In the first days of the prosecution's case, Fairstein brought in the crime scene unit detectives and went over the forensics. The police investigators were used to being witnesses with public defenders, and their methods didn't stand up to Littman's intense preparation. Littman got a detective to suggest that Jennifer couldn't have been killed where Robert claimed she was because the earth was undisturbed, but the crime scene unit had failed to take photos of the ground disturbance 50 feet away.
That was really a big mistake.
Big mistake. And there was also no evidence to prove where the panties had been found because they were not photographed in the park either. Another mistake.
Well, I think some of the cops initially thought that those were someone else's panties that just happened to be over there, which was pretty stupid.
Well, how do you think that?
I don't know.
You know?
Pretty stupid. Jennifer's girlfriend, Alexandra, who'd been with her at Dorian's that last night, testified for the prosecution. But Littman was able to get her to admit that Robert Chambers was one of the reasons Jennifer wanted to stay there when Alexandra left. Jennifer's friends were all cross-examined about Jennifer being sexually active with Robert and how attracted she was to him. So Littman insinuated to jurors that Robert was just this ordinary guy who'd gotten into a strange situation with a predatory girl.
Those women, they can do that to you. Such bullshit.
Yes, totally.
So Robert's videotaped confession was played in the courtroom, and Jennifer's father, Steve Levin, hadn't seen the tape before. He's watching it and shaking his head from side to side. When it was over, a mob of reporters asked him about it, and he said it was a pack of lies. Jennifer was not an irrational, crazy kid, and she wouldn't have willingly gone to the park at 4 a.m. He believed she'd been taken there, but the jurors seemed to believe that she had gone willingly.
I think she went willingly.
I do too.
I don't think that's anything against her. Doesn't take away any guilt from him.
No.
No. But Fairstein was adamant that pictures of Jennifer at Dorian's earlier that night should be showed to jurors. She wanted them to see that she'd been wearing the earrings, but more importantly, she wanted the jury to see that Jennifer had been this vibrant, beautiful teenager. I mean, just a girl. And then compare that to when she was all bruised. I mean, she had a neck that was unbruised and unscarred in these pictures. She wanted them to see the real Jennifer before she was brutalized. The judge decided that the jury could see the photos, but some tape was placed over her ears so jurors couldn't see the earrings, and they were told not to speculate about what was underneath the tape.
Yeah,
Silly to me.
I'm just not sure what that achieved.
How can you not speculate?
Right. I mean, there's tape over the earrings?
Yeah.
Oh, what do you think was there?
I know, right? Kind of dumb. I guess it was a compromise.
I guess. So the medical examiner testified on the 20th day of the trial and described Jennifer's bruises and other injuries, which included the one inside her mouth. The medical examiner speculated that compression of her neck would have had to have been for at least 20 or 30 seconds. possibly longer. But judging from the deep abrasions on the neck, the pressure could have been maintained for over a minute.
Well, it takes a while to strangle someone, though, right?
It does.
Fairstein had tried to contact Phyllis's maid for months to question her about Robert's clothing. Didn't turn out to be a big deal, but it could have been significant. Phyllis had actually sent her maid on a trip to her country of origin, Brazil, and Phyllis told her not to hurry back, that she should just stay for the summer.
Yeah, so you know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, the maid began to wonder if Phyllis wanted her out of the country, so she couldn't be called to testify about the dirty, bloody shirt she'd seen. She considered getting in touch with the DA's office, but she was afraid. Phyllis had told her that if she went to the district attorney's office, she might get in trouble with immigration.
Now, Dr. Werner Spitz, who was the chief medical examiner of Detroit, was the last and most important prosecution witness. Spitz told the jury during Fairstein's questioning that the only way Jennifer's neck and chin could have gotten the scrapes that marred them was if she had been choked with her own blouse. Robert must have grabbed her with it, twisted it, and shoved it up under her throat with his fist so that it became, in effect, a noose. And there were marks that showed she had tried to escape the noose, but her attacker had resumed the violent act, and, intending to kill, he tightened the noose and compressed her neck for as long as several minutes. Under cross-examination, Spitz never wavered on this belief, but he was so stubborn that several of the jurors actually disliked him.
Yeah, we've read about him in other cases, and he could be kind of dislikable.
Well, he's kind of didactic.
Yeah.
He lectures people, and I can see that. But still, you've given testimony that's reasonable testimony, and you dislike him because he comes across as a prick.
But I think in the Casey Anthony trial, if I'm not mistaken, he testified for the defense for Casey Anthony.
He did.
About that tape, and he kind of fucked that up for the prosecution.
Yeah.
So I think he might go either way, whoever hires him. Just throwing that out there, I don't know.
Okay, we'll leave that.
But after resting her case, Fairstein wasn't super happy. She was quite frustrated. Her witnesses had been humiliated and discredited. She'd lost her battle to show that Robert had robbed Jennifer, and she'd been unable to make use of the lies he told police before the videotaped confession. So in Brazil, people who went to the police station could just end up disappearing. But Phyllis's maid, Marilee, had received another message from Linda Fairstein. She forced herself to go to her office after she returned to the States, and she told Linda everything she remembered about the day Jennifer died. The scratches, her conversations with Phyllis, and washing the bloody shirt. Now Marilee was terrified that she might have to testify. Linda showed her the crime scene photos, though, and it changed the way she viewed this case. After seeing the red welts on Jennifer's face and neck, she was sure that this girl couldn't have died by accident, the way that Phyllis and Robert had been telling her.
No, that would have been difficult. It's now Jack Littman's turn to present his side of the case, and he produced the medical examiner of Los Angeles, who claimed that Jennifer's many bruises could have come from her tripping and falling while she was in the park. Her left eye may have been puffy from the way she had landed after Robert flipped her. He also said that Robert's scratches on his face and chest could be from playful sexual activity. He said that he believed Jennifer died as a result of a chokehold.
Isn't that the same as strangling?
It is. Then the defense rested.
So this was surprising,
So holy cow.
Fairstein was surprised. She thought he'd be calling several more witnesses, and she had been prepared with rebuttal witnesses. And then she wondered if he rested so quickly because there was someone he didn't want her to cross-examine. But in the end she concluded that Littman had decided he'd made his case and he was done. So this was bad for her. The lightning speed of his presentation could be interpreted by the jury as, my client is so clearly innocent that I don't even have to belabor the point.
Well, I don't know. That's a tough one to sell.
Yeah, but sometimes if you get up there and say, that's it, people think, oh, well, he must be pretty sure of himself.
Yeah.
So deliberations begun on March 17th, and the jury was sequestered at this time. They were confined to the deliberation room all day and put in cheap hotels at night. If they couldn't convict Robert of intentional or depraved indifference murder, they had 3 lesser choices. These choices were manslaughter in the first degree, manslaughter in the second degree, or criminally negligent homicide. But first they had to make a unanimous decision about the murder charges.
Yeah, now the initial vote was 3 people in favor of convicting Robert of intentional murder and 9 opposed. Now that's strange to me. I would have thought it'd be 9 in favor and 3 opposed. I know that the prosecution didn't like how they got their case presented, but it seems to me that the evidence was clearly in that favor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the whole perception at this time, though. There's so much going into it.
Yeah, so they go on and on. It's becoming apparent that you might have a hung jury. So on the 9th day of jury deliberations, Fairstein and Littman met in the judge's chambers to hammer out details of a plea. Now, Fairstein didn't want Jennifer's family to have to go through a trial again if there could be a mistrial, and Littman began to fear that his client would be convicted, and even if he was acquitted, he'd still be given a stiff sentence for the burglary charges. So they hashed it out, and Fairstein got Littman to agree to first-degree manslaughter, but a shorter sentence of 5 to 15 years. She also agreed that Robert would not be prosecuted for the pending burglary charges or any other criminal acts, including the $7,000 in checks he had stolen from his elderly neighbor to buy cocaine.
One thing Fairstein would not give in on, though, was the language Robert had to use when he stood up to make his plea. He had to say that he meant to hurt Jennifer. She wanted that for the Levins. So the story of Robert killing Jennifer because she brutalized him during sex could finally be put to rest. At his plea, the judge asked, "Mr. Chambers, is it true that on August 26, 1986, you intended to cause serious physical injury to Jennifer Levin and thereby cause the death of Jennifer Levin?" He answered yes, but he went on shaking his head no.
Yeah, but it stood.
It did. I mean, he did finally say yes. He didn't want to. He fought that.
Yeah.
For the first few weeks of his incarceration, Robert Chambers was moved from prison to prison. Eventually, he was kept at the Great Meadow Correctional Facility in Comstock, New York, for the duration of his sentence. He said the older inmates taught him the ropes in prison, but how he actually did his time tells us a lot about him as a person, I think.
It sure does. He had 27 disciplinary violations for everything from weapons possession, drug possession, assault, and disobeying direct orders. Now, Chambers would say later that many of these charges were minor, even trumped up, but because of his poor disciplinary record, he spent more than 4 years in solitary confinement and ended up serving the full 15 years of his sentence.
And he still didn't really seem to learn his lesson.
No, we'll find that out.
Well, right after prison, he moved to Georgia with his girlfriend, Shawn Koval. The two knew each other for a long time, and she'd even appeared in that infamous doll video that he made at the New Year's party. He worked at a dye factory, and the two lived in Georgia for about 9 months before moving to an East 57th Street Manhattan apartment in New York City. Then he began working for a limousine company in Queens, and later at a New Jersey sports trophy manufacturer's engraving plant. In 2004, he was stopped in his Saab for driving with a suspended driver's license, and police found heroin and cocaine in the car. Chambers pleaded guilty in 2005 for the charges, and he was sentenced to a reduced sentence of 90 days in jail. So to me, that's very lenient.
It is. He's a convicted felon, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, in 2007, he was arrested again, along with his girlfriend, Shawn. Chambers and Koval were charged with running a cocaine operation out of their apartment. And at the time they arrested him, he fought with police, and one detective suffered a broken thumb. So at this time, his former district attorney, Linda Fairstein, who had prosecuted Chambers for Levin's death, said following this arrest, "Doesn't surprise me. I always believed his problem with drugs and alcohol would get him in trouble again. He's had the opportunity in prison to detox and take college courses to straighten out his life, but that clearly is of no interest to him. He's learned nothing in the last 20 years. So he's in jail now, and his girlfriend."
Yeah. We got the information for this episode from a variety of sources that I want to mention, including court records, a book called Wasted, written by Linda Wolf, and there were several newspaper and magazine articles. 48 Hours has 2 episodes on this case, one made earlier and one made after the 2007 rearrest. Although Bob and Phyllis Chambers didn't testify at their son's trial, they did testify in hearings, and they shared some of their thoughts, which we tried to put into this episode as we told the story. There was a TV movie made in 1989 called The Preppy Murder. Lara Flynn Boyle played Jennifer Levin, William Baldwin played Robert Chambers. I really did want to watch it, but I haven't been able to find it streaming anywhere, or even find the DVD to buy. But I bet it's pretty good.
Maybe.
As far as made-for-TV movies go, you know. So before we go on, a little reminder about our sponsor.
Let's hear it for Freshly.
If you're tired of spending hours on dinner or trying to master meal kits, try Freshly. Freshly's the new way to get dinner on the table in no time. Their chefs cook and deliver delicious, freshly prepared meals so you can eat healthier without the work. Each meal is made to order for you, and a rotating weekly menu of more than 30 options made with high-quality ingredients. There's always something new, all natural, and nutritious to try.
Order Freshly today and see what it's like to put zero effort into making dinner.
I already know what that's like because you
Yeah. Go to freshly.com/brewery to get $20 off your first 6 dinners.
Now just a little bit of TCB housekeeping before our listener feedback.
Let's hear it.
Because we all know listening to free podcasts is great, but if you really, really like listening to True Crime Brewery and you've run out of episodes, there is a way to give some financial support and get access to some members-only full-length episodes of True Crime Brewery. On our website, tiegrabber.com, you can sign up to have access to our members-only episodes. It's affordable at $3 or $5 a month. You choose what you want to pay. We have almost 20 extra episodes in the feed, with new ones being released monthly. In March, we covered Amish serial killer Eli Stutzman and the death of his son Danny, also known as Little Boy Blue. In April, we're covering the torture and murder of 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer by Krista Pike. This crime is sometimes referred to as the Job Corps killing. When you sign up for Tie Grabber, you're going to get access to these episodes, and you're going to get a gift from us. If you're a $5 a month subscriber, you'll receive one of our True Crime Brewery snifters, which are Dick's go-to glasses for most of the beers that he reviews on the show. Plus, I'm going to send you a sticker, some coasters, and whatever good swag we have hanging around the studio. If you contribute $3 a month, you're going to get a sticker and a magnet too, plus you're going to get a True Crime Brewery credit card-sized bottle opener that fits in your pocket or your wallet. It's great with the warm weather coming up because you can just put it in your pocket, grab a 6-pack, and you're good to go.
They're very useful. I went to a beer tasting or beer sharing event yesterday with my good friend Dave.
Yeah.
And there was a half dozen people, and they were very happy that I had my beer bottle opener.
Yeah, cool. We also have t-shirts for sale on our website. We've got the classic gray tees, and we've got our new red tees. If you're looking for another podcast to listen to, we also have another one. It's called Watching ID, where we watch a show on the Investigation Discovery Channel and we talk about it. And right now we've been covering Season 5 of A Crime to Remember. You don't have to watch the show on TV to enjoy the podcast because we give it a whole recap. One more thing, we'll be at CrimeCon in Nashville from May 4th to May 6th. This is our first time there, so we're really excited. And we just heard that Keith Morrison's going to be there, along with Josh, Andrea, and Dennis from Dateline. Keith's my hero, so we're really happy. We hope we get to meet him.
Well, one of us is.
If you get the time and you want to come hang out with us, you can get 10% off your ticket by using promo code TCBrewery. You can sign up at crimecon.com and use TC Brewery for your discount. Thanks to everyone who sent us feedback for the show. We're going to read some now. Okay, Dick, why don't you go first?
I get to go first?
Yeah.
2 weeks in a row.
I know.
Oh, thank you. So we have a case suggestion from Susanna P. It's a case about Jill Maher. So the Jill Maher case shocked Australia in 2012. It was a random attack on a beautiful Irish national who was living in Melbourne. A known sex offender on parole, Adrian Bailey, brutally raped and murdered Jill and dumped her body in the bush. The state of Victoria's parole laws were tested, and many people were outraged that Bailey was out on parole when he should have been in prison. He had raped a lot of women, and the feeling was that his sentence was not harsh enough. I think this could be a very good case for you guys to cover.
We do like Australian cases.
Yeah, but every time I pick a beer, I get yelled at.
Well, somebody needs to send you some good Australian beer, because we just are ignorant to it.
Let's work this out, Aussies.
Yeah.
Send me some beer.
Right. Send them some good beer. We'll be happy to send you some good United States beer back.
Maine beer.
Maine. Maine has good beer.
But that's an interesting case, and I think could be a good comment on the parole laws.
Well, yeah, we have a lot of that in the United States as well, where these people are out and they really shouldn't be, and then they reoffend. And it's really horrible to think that somebody could still be alive, but they were a victim to some horrible crime because someone was let out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have another case suggestion from Ashley C. Jill, I am a podcast junkie and have binged through all of your episodes. I love hearing your opinions on the cases and reviews on the beer. I have a case suggestion for you. It is currently making headlines in my little hometown. The case involves drugs, prostitution, and maybe a love triangle. 2/3 of the accused murderers have been sentenced, and the third is on trial. So I looked this up. She gave me a link, and this is a really fascinating case. There's so much to it. So I just have a little brief synopsis on what it's about. Marissa Shepard made headlines in the early part of 2016 by evading police for a practically unheard of 10 weeks during a nationwide manhunt as one suspect in what police called an extremely violent murder of a Moncton teenager. She was eventually arrested on March 1st outside a motel in the city and charged alongside Devin Morningstar and Tyler Noel, both arrested earlier, with first-degree murder in the death of Bailey Wiley. According to police interrogation videos played at the murder trial of Devin Morningstar, Shepard was in the basement of a Moncton triplex in mid-December with 3 guys, all of whom were under 20. Morningstar said the 4 were smoking crack and having a disagreement about who slept with who. Now, I can't tell you how many parties I've been to, as an aside, where you're smoking crack and you start disagreeing about who slept with who, and all hell breaks loose.
I know, it happens all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, you got to be careful about that. Now, Morningstar told Kodiak RCMP that he had recently broken up with a girlfriend. Morningstar recalled sleeping with Shepard and then finding out the next day that Noel and Wiley also hooked up. The claim that Wiley had also hooked up with Morningstar apparently escalated into a dispute, and Wiley threatened to call the cops. Both Noel and Morningstar were dealing drugs at the time, said Morningstar, and Noel also had a gun hidden under the couch. Well, that's another thing. You don't want to keep a gun under your couch when you're smoking crack and arguing about who slept with who.
I think there's only bad things that can come from that.
Right. By Morningstar's account to police, Noel and Shepard pitched a plan to frame Wiley for drug possession. This allegedly involved Shepard knocking Wiley over the head with a glass bong. I'm sorry to laugh, but for some reason that strikes me as funny.
Yeah. Wouldn't it break? I mean, if you're going to hit the...
Must be a heavy-duty one.
Yeah.
Beating him bloody, and the 2 covering his face and body in saran wrap. Oh. Morningstar claimed he heard Noel say, "This is what happens to rats."
Isn't Wiley a girl? Bailey Wiley?
Yeah.
So why did you say him? The 2 covering his face and body in saran wrap.
I don't know. It says beating him bloody. I'm just reading what it says, so maybe it is a guy. Morningstar said they had briefly freed Wiley from the saran wrap until Noel pulled Morningstar aside to say, "This kid can't leave the house." In tears, Morningstar described the other 2 stabbing Wiley simultaneously. Morningstar said he also stabbed Wiley 3 times to prove he was solid to Noel.
Well, that's essential.
So all told, Morningstar said it took an hour and a half for Wiley to die. He said he then poured bleach on the body and claimed Noel and Shepard set fire to the building. There's a lot more, a very disturbing case with a crazy group of young people. So, I think it's a guy, from what it says, unless that's an error in the pronoun.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, Tyler, Noel, and Bailey Wiley hooked up. So, is that heterosexual or homosexual?
I'm thinking it is a girl, because it's spelled Baylee. That's a girl. So they probably just had the wrong pronoun.
I think so.
Okay. Anyway, you get the gist.
And then we're talking about the love triangle.
But that's the gist of it anyway.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
that sounds like an interesting case. And we got a beer review from the Pump House Brewery in California to go with
Well, she
that.
didn't give you a review. She recommended that you review it.
Well, we might do that.
Yeah. I think
So
that one
this is
might be a good one to do.
I guess this is a California crime. Because I heard Moncton and I was thinking Canada. But okay, we'll check that out. Sounds interesting.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashley. Sorry we kind of fucked it up a little, but
Yeah.
it was fun to read. And we enjoyed it.
We had too much fun reading that one.
We did.
Okay, next up is Amanda R., who has a comment on the Zara Baker case. My niece is almost 11 and tries that staying in her room stuff. When I'm over, we'll go in and interact with her all the time and make her come downstairs. You don't just leave a child in their room like that. Her mom and dad always make her come down all day long, off and on. Ugh.
Right, which is just supporting what we said, because Zara's father had said she was at a brooding stage and never came out of her room, and claimed that that's why he didn't see her for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, which is totally not cool.
No.
No.
I mean, we both have had kids that like to stay in their rooms, but we still see them on a daily basis.
Probably more than that, yeah.
So.
Yeah, so that is not an excuse, and I think that's a good idea. You need to go in and check in with your kid, even if they don't want you to. That's your job. You're supposed to annoy them.
You are.
Yeah.
That's what parents do.
Absolutely.
And I got another one. I got another comment from Jeanette H.
Okay.
On the Zara Baker case, who says, woulda, shoulda, coulda. If you suspect that a child is being abused and the authorities are not taking it seriously, tell them they have 24 hours to act, or you're going to the press and you will be naming names. I'm sick of listening to excuses. It's not hard. If you see it, do something about it. Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you. And this is something that I bang my head on the studio wall all the time about.
I know.
They noticed this, but they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
They thought about this, but then they didn't tell anyone. It happens all the time.
Right. And the whole thing is, if you think something's wrong, voice your concerns.
Especially when it's somebody who is so vulnerable as a child, or like we said a couple weeks ago, like elderly people. Or like the case of Cherry, someone who has a disability. I mean, all these people need to be looked out for.
They do.
Yeah. So I have a comment from friend of the show, Alana. She's written to us plenty of times before, and she always has some great insight. She has a comment also on the Zara Baker case.
I guess we got some people thinking about Zara, huh?
It's a hard case, yeah.
It's a grisly, horrible case.
It is. So Alana says, I often flinch at the interviews with killers who use such opportunities to protest their innocence. But I thought the Aussie reporter was really good.
Oh, we did too.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem like they do that in the United States.
No, she did not suffer fools. I liked that.
This woman went right after her.
She did.
Holy cow.
So Alana hadn't heard it before either. When I first heard of this case, it was hard to comprehend Zara's mistreatment at the hands of Elisa, especially given Zara's cancer and disabilities, and spirit. I agree with Dick that Zara was a cool little kid. Also agree with Dick that being considered soulmates online before meeting a person is too amazing and, I think, far-fetched. As Jill says, until you meet in person. I find that term overused anyway. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the soulmate term either.
No.
Also, until you meet in person, you don't know if the words in cyberspace are revealing or concealing.
How true.
Sometimes the most beautiful words can hide a very ugly side. I see Adam as very passive, which can come off as slow or relaxed. After people he knew could see Elisa's lying, his passivity took precedence. Very thoughtless of him to take Zara away from what she knew and loved, and was loved by. Then detached from her and allowed time to pass without checking on her. How abandoned she must have felt. Looks like Elisa had Adam's number, and although he isn't the killer, he made it easier for her to abuse and murder Zara. Children pay dearly for the thoughtlessness of parents. Had to think about it, but agree with Jill that most inadequate parents think of themselves as good parents. But I don't think this was the case with Elisa. When an adult like her starts to bully and abuse a child, it becomes a nuclear chain reaction, escalating out of control and used to vent all their fears, resentment, anger, and frustration. That she kept saying she was a good parent supports the opposite. Elisa's world of words and using them to lie excessively now came into collision with the reality of a murdered missing child. And Elisa would still think her words could carry the day. How dreadful that Zara's last human contact in her short life was Elisa. Thank you for the grueling podcast, adeptly handled. So that's a big compliment to me that we adeptly handled it. Thank you, because we were worried about it.
It was, but because we'll also agree that it was a grueling podcast. It was just hard to do.
The whole week of gathering the research really sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was horrific.
But the Aussie reporter, love her. She was excellent.
Yeah. I would love to see someone on 60 Minutes or Dateline or something go after him like that.
I can think of a few people I'd like her to interview.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. I have a case suggestion from Has Y. Mick Philpott, exclamation point. He murdered 6 of his kids and tried to blame it on his other wife. He had 2 wives living together with him at the time. Well, I like this.
Yeah.
Not the 2 wives part.
No, good.
Who is Mick Philpott? He gained notoriety in the mid-90s for fathering 17 children by 5 different women, and he relied on state benefits. In November 26, he was criticized for demanding a larger council house after getting both his wife and mistress pregnant at the same time. A year later, Philpott appeared on the Jeremy Kyle show to defend his lifestyle and insisted he had undergone a vasectomy. In the late 70s, he was jailed for 7 years for attempted murder and grievous bodily harm. Then, age 21, he attacked his former girlfriend, who was 17, with a knife as she lay in bed after ending their relationship. He then turned on her mother when she intervened. He was jailed for life in 2013 after killing 6 of his children in a fire when a plot to frame his ex-lover went wrong. His wife, Mayreed Philpott, and family friend Paul Mosley were each jailed for 17 years. The trio had been convicted of 6 counts of manslaughter. The 6 victims, Dwayne, 13, his sister Jade, 10, brothers John, 9, Jack, 8, Jesse, 6, and Jaden, 5, all perished in the fire as it swept through their home in Allenton, Derby.
That's England, right?
That is. Lisa Willis, Philpott's live-in mistress, had left the family home with her 4 children a few months earlier, and a custody hearing over the children was scheduled to take place on the morning of the fire. Philpott hatched a plan with Mayreed and Mosley to incriminate Lisa while posing as a hero who saved his children.
What a moron.
Jesus Christ. But the planned rescue went tragically wrong when he was beaten back by the flames as the blaze, which had been started with petrol poured through a letterbox, got out of control in a matter of seconds. The couple wept at a press conference as they appeared for witnesses to come forward after the attack. Professor Dawn Archer, who is a specialist in linguistics at Manchester Metropolitan University, told the Derby Telegraph, "Philpott holds a sad expression and emotion too long, and his sobs appear fake. Often a person who is sad will drop their shoulders and hold themselves different, and this will make their voice low. But in Philpott's case, he continues to be loud and vocal."
So they decided he was lying, and then, of course, they must have found evidence, too, because he doesn't sound very smart.
It's always nice to have evidence. No, he doesn't sound very intelligent, does he?
What a horrible thing to do.
6 of your kids. And even if you're thinking, well, I'm going to do this and set it up so I can be a hero to rescue them, fires don't act the way you might think they should.
Well, and I think anyone should know that. You don't put your children at risk like that. It's just the whole thing's stupid.
Very.
Yeah. But I do like the sounds of it, although a lot of people have been writing lately and asking me not to do so many cases with children. So we might want to put it off for a while, but it's a case that fascinates me.
Well, how old?
How old?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
So like 10 and under, we should wait for a while, or what?
There's no specific age. It's just that a lot of people have trouble listening to the cases about children.
Well, we just did a children.
We've done a lot of them lately.
We have.
We did Cherie. We did Zara. Well, and I feel like Cherry Walker was like a child.
Jennifer Levin was a child.
I don't hear so much about the ones with teenagers.
Okay.
I think it's more the younger
it's
children.
The little kids.
Yeah.
All right.
But I do think I'll keep that in my...
Yeah, no, just the depravity of this act. I think that'd be a good one to do.
Okay.
And it'd be interesting to talk about this guy who has multiple wives.
Okay, well, that's all I have for feedback today because it was a long episode.
It was, but we had fun.
We did. And thank you so much for your feedback. If you have some feedback you'd like to share with us, please send it to truecrimebrewery@tygrabber.com, or you can also send it to me on Twitter, on Instagram. We also have a Facebook True Crime Brewery fans discussion page where we have over 1,000 people now who talk about True Crime Brewery cases and other cases, things we might like to do or things that other people have done that we just want to chat about.
Yeah, and just to mention that we read every feedback.
We do.
So if yours isn't mentioned, it's because we think it's a pile of shit. You're going to cut that out, aren't you?
No. It's not true.
No.
It's just we didn't have room for it, or we'll get to it because, sometimes it takes a while before I get it out.
That's right. That's what I was meaning to say.
Okay. All right. Well, Thank you, everybody, and we will talk to you next week at The Quiet End.
See you guys.